Listen carefully, because what I am about to say is not meant to soothe you, and once it settles in, you will not be able to pretend you never heard it. It is a truth most people spend their lives avoiding, because it demands that they face the very reflection they have been running from. You are not magnetic because of your skin. You are not magnetic because of the balance of your features, the shape of your jaw, the color of your eyes, or the hours you spend sculpting yourself in the gym or studying your reflection each morning. None of those things by themselves create real attraction. That kind of attention is temporary. It disappears like light on water the moment conditions shift. Real magnetism comes from something far less visible. It is not the image you display, but the energy you embody. The presence that pulls others in without words, without effort, without the need to perform. It is the invisible force around you that can make a room feel charged when you enter it, or strangely hollow when you are gone. And here is the truth most people do not want to face. That force is not born from perfection. It is born from your shadow. And when I say shadow, I do not mean the polished parts of you hidden behind manners, charm, or practiced smiles. I mean the deeper part, the untamed part, the part that exists beneath the surface, the raw self within you that knows exactly who you are. The parts you were taught to suppress, deny, or label unacceptable. That is where your deepest power lives. And it is also the place most people spend their entire lives trying to bury. Carl Jung called this the shadow, and he warned that turning away from it always comes with a price. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your doorway. But it is frightening because once you truly face it, once you allow yourself to see it clearly, there is no returning to who you were before. Why do some people walk into a room and seem to shift the atmosphere without saying a word? Why do others move through that same room unnoticed, as if their presence dissolves before it even lands? It is not their clothing. It is not their height. It is not even their words. It is the invisible energy they have learned to carry. It is the self-awareness that saturates every movement, every breath, every look. And the truth is, you can cultivate that too. But first, you must face what you've been avoiding. Look at yourself closely. Beyond the social mask, beyond the smile you've trained to make everyone feel comfortable, there's an animal waiting to breathe. There is a force that is yours. Raw, untamed, unfiltered. Rage, fear, desire, hunger. All of it. That is the energy the world is too polite, too fearful, too small to acknowledge. But you, if you are willing, can learn to channel it. You can take that raw, intense force and turn it into something magnetic, something that pulls others toward you, not because they understand, not because they approve, but because they feel it deep in their bodies. This is the first thing most people get wrong. They think magnetism is a trick. They think it's a learned behavior, a set of techniques to make someone like you, to perform in ways others find acceptable. They are wrong. Real magnetism cannot be faked. It cannot be imitated because it originates in a place too deep for imitation. It is born from coherence, from an alignment between who you are inside and what you project outside. And here's the challenge. Coherence doesn't mean showing everything. It means selectively revealing parts of yourself in a way that is intentional, in a way that leaves others wanting more. Most people live reactively. They shape their energy to meet expectations. They adjust their tone, their movements, their attention to fit the environment. And that's why they pass through life unnoticed. The truly magnetic person does the opposite. They make the environment adjust to them. They do not chase. They do not plead. They command attention with the quiet authority of someone who knows they need nothing from anyone. And when people sense that, they cannot look away. The energy you carry is sacred. Most people waste it on small talk, on meaningless interactions, on gestures that carry no weight. But every movement, every word, every glance can be charged. Think of it like a blade. When you speak, your words can cut or carve. When you are silent, the silence itself can hold tension, can draw attention, can make people lean in, not knowing why. This is the first step in cultivating real magnetism. Treating your energy as currency, spending it with precision, never squandering it. And here's a critical truth. Intensity alone does not create magnetism. Screaming, dominating, or flooding the space with yourself is not the same as having presence. True magnetism is subtle, strategic. It is knowing when to enter, when to withdraw, when to allow your energy to rise, and when to allow it to recede. It is like the tide, not a sudden storm, but a force that pulls inexorably, leaving its mark on everyone it touches. Most people cannot handle this kind of power. They are comfortable with superficial approval. They are satisfied with polite smiles and small compliments. But you, if you are reading this, if something inside you resonates, you are not here for comfort. You are here to awaken, to step into a part of yourself that terrifies others because they have never faced it in themselves. And yet that same part is what can make you unforgettable, irresistible, magnetic. The magnetic person does not live to be liked. They live to be felt. They understand that people do not remember facts. They do not obsess over what you said or the outfit you wore. They remember sensations, reactions, disruptions in their emotional rhythm. They remember the spark, the electric jolt, the tension and release that makes them feel alive. And they associate that with you. That is your power. That is where you begin. And here's the kicker. To harness this, you must be willing to integrate what you have denied all your life. That rage you've suppressed, that desire you've hidden, that hunger you've silenced. These are not flaws. These are the tools of your magnetism. They are the raw energy that, when controlled, focused, and strategically applied, will make you unforgettable. Most people shrink from this work. Most choose comfort over impact. But comfort never leaves a mark. Comfort never makes the air around you crackle. So I ask you now, are you willing to face your shadow? Are you willing to stop hiding behind your social mask, your trained smile, your rehearsed charm, and instead allow the real you, the untamed, intense, raw you to emerge? Because once you do, there is no going back. Once you integrate your shadow, once you reclaim the energy you've been suppressing, you will never again enter a room as just another face. People will feel you before they see you. They will remember you long after you are gone. And the world will adjust not to their expectations, but to your presence. This is not a game. It is not a trick. It is not a fleeting performance. This is a life-altering process, and it begins with one step. Acknowledging the part of you you've avoided, the energy you've denied, and the presence you've been too polite or too afraid to claim. From this point forward, everything changes. When most people talk about attraction, they speak about the surface, the smile, the clothes, the posture. They speak about being liked, admired, desired. But what they miss entirely is that true magnetism doesn't live in the surface. It lives in the depths, in the shadows they've tried to ignore, the parts of themselves they've trained to hide. The shadow isn't a villain. It's not the part of you that makes you bad or broken. It's the raw, unfiltered essence of your being. The fire that burns when no one is watching. The hunger for life, for experience, for sensation that social conditioning tries to tame. It's your instinctual self, the part that knows what it wants and is willing to go after it. And yet, most people keep it locked away, fearing what would happen if they unleashed it. But here's the uncomfortable truth. What you've been taught to suppress is exactly what others crave. People feel a subtle pull toward those who are unafraid to inhabit their own energy fully, who don't apologize for the intensity they carry. That pull isn't learned. It isn't a technique. It's a vibration emitted from someone who has integrated their shadow, who has reconciled the light and dark within themselves. Integration is the key word. You cannot pretend your shadow away. You cannot build magnetism by pretending to be the socially acceptable version of yourself. The world doesn't fall in love with facades. It reacts to authenticity, to depth, to someone who has faced the uncomfortable and survived it. The moment you stop performing, stop filtering, stop apologizing for being alive, that's when people start noticing. That's when your presence shifts from background noise to gravitational force. Think of it like this. Every human carries around a certain amount of emotional energy. Most people leak it in meaningless ways, agreeing when they disagree, laughing when they don't find something funny, performing small acts just to fit in. But the magnetic person does the opposite. They conserve, they direct, they amplify. They understand that energy is sacred and finite. Every word, every glance, every gesture becomes a tool. And when wielded consciously, it can command attention, evoke desire, and create obsession without ever asking for it. And here's where the shadow works its magic. The parts of you you've ignored, the parts you feared, contain the most potent energy. Your rage, your desire, your fear, your unspoken impulses. They're all currents that, when integrated, become fuel. But fuel for what? Not for destruction. Fuel for presence. Fuel for the force that makes rooms quiet when you enter. Fuel for that invisible current that makes people remember not just what you said, but how you made them feel. Most people avoid their shadows because they fear the consequences. If I show my anger, I'll be rejected. If I admit what I want, they'll think I'm selfish. If I stop performing, I'll be invisible. And yes, these are real fears. But here's the twist. The moment you acknowledge them, the moment you face them without judgment, they lose their control over you. And in their place, something much more powerful emerges. A presence that cannot be ignored because it is rooted in total self-possession. Magnetism isn't about being loud or dominating. It's about being coherent. Your internal world must match your external projection. When you're fragmented, when your outside says one thing and your inside says another, people sense it. They feel the tension, the misalignment, the inconsistency. They might like the surface, but they don't feel the pull. They don't want to follow because there's nothing to follow. But when your internal world is anchored, when your shadow and your light are aligned, when your energy is concentrated rather than dispersed, people are drawn to it instinctively. And let me be clear, this isn't about faking depth or creating an illusion. That's the mistake most make. They think if they act mysterious, if they smile cryptically, if they sprinkle in ambiguous statements, they'll suddenly be magnetic. That's surface-level trickery. Real magnetism can't be faked. It's too deep. It's born from a place that can't lie, because it is your essential self, stripped of pretense, and the world, consciously or not, feels it immediately. Here's the paradox. Most people spend their lives trying to fit in. to make themselves safe, predictable, and acceptable. And yet, the very thing that makes them invisible, their predictability, their safety, is exactly what keeps them from being remembered. No one obsesses over a person who is safe or nice. Obsession, fascination, attraction, awe, they all require intensity. And intensity requires authenticity. It requires vulnerability. It requires risk. Vulnerability isn't weakness. In fact, it's one of the strongest magnets. But it must be deliberate. It must be controlled. The magnetic person knows exactly what to show, when, and how. They reveal in layers like an artist unveiling a painting stroke by stroke. They understand that too much exposure too soon kills mystery, and too little leaves people wondering if there's even anything behind the mask. The goal is balance, letting glimpses of your shadow slip out. Just enough to unsettle, intrigue, and pull. And here's a nuance many miss. Magnetism is relational. It's not about how you feel about yourself in isolation. It's about how your presence alters the emotional landscape of others. Can you enter a room and immediately change its rhythm? Can you speak and have people listen, not just because of the content, but because of the charge behind the words? Can you sit in silence and make it heavy, meaningful, unforgettable? These are skills born from self-mastery, from shadow work, from understanding your internal currents. The shadow also teaches timing. True magnetism isn't constant. It's a rhythm. Sometimes fire, sometimes ice, sometimes presence, sometimes absence. People who are magnetic understand that obsession comes from tension, from the ebb and flow of energy. Give too much too fast, and the spell breaks. Give too little, and they forget you. But when you calibrate your energy, when you manage it like a conductor manages an orchestra, every interaction becomes an event. People remember not just what happened, but how it made them feel. And that feeling, anchored in your presence, lasts far longer than any superficial charm. So what does all this mean for you? It means that the first step to becoming magnetic is courage. Courage to look at yourself, to see your shadow, to embrace it without judgment. Courage to stop performing, to stop asking permission, to stop filtering your presence to fit the expectations of others. Courage to face the uncomfortable, to feel the intensity of your own desires and fears, and to channel them into a presence that cannot be ignored. Here's the paradox. Most people spend their lives trying to fit in, to make themselves safe, predictable, and acceptable. And yet, the very thing that makes them invisible, their predictability, their safety, is exactly what keeps them from being remembered. No one obsesses over a person who is safe or nice. Obsession, fascination, attraction, awe, they all require intensity. And intensity requires authenticity. It requires vulnerability. It requires risk. Vulnerability isn't weakness. In fact, it's one of the strongest magnets. But it must be deliberate. It must be controlled. The magnetic person knows exactly what to show, when, and how. They reveal in layers like an artist unveiling a painting stroke by stroke. They understand that too much exposure too soon kills mystery, and too little leaves people wondering if there's even anything behind the mask. The goal is balance, letting glimpses of your shadow slip out, just enough to unsettle, intrigue, and pull. And here's a nuance many miss. Magnetism is relational. It's not about how you feel about yourself in isolation. It's about how your presence alters the emotional landscape of others. Can you enter a room and immediately change its rhythm? Can you speak and have people listen, not just because of the content, but because of the charge behind the words? Can you sit in silence and make it heavy, meaningful, unforgettable? These are skills born from self-mastery, from shadow work, from understanding your internal currents. The shadow also teaches timing. True magnetism isn't constant. It's a rhythm. Sometimes fire, sometimes ice, sometimes presence, sometimes absence. People who are magnetic understand that obsession comes from tension, from the ebb and flow of energy. Give too much too fast and the spell breaks. Give too little and they forget you. But when you calibrate your energy, when you manage it like a conductor manages an orchestra, every interaction becomes an event. People remember not just what happened, but how it made them feel. And that feeling, anchored in your presence, lasts far longer than any superficial charm. So what does all this mean for you? It means that the first step to becoming magnetic is courage. Courage to look at yourself, to see your shadow, to embrace it without judgment. Courage to stop performing, to stop asking permission, to stop filtering your presence to fit the expectations of others. Courage to face the uncomfortable, to feel the intensity of your own desires and fears, and to channel them into a presence that cannot be ignored. Because here's the truth. You already have it. The power, the intensity, the force, the magnetism. It's not outside of you. It's been there all along. Buried under layers of conditioning, under the weight of social rules, under the fear of rejection. All the work you've been doing externally, diets, grooming style, charm, is secondary. The real work is internal. And when that work is done, when the shadow is integrated and energy is harnessed, the results are undeniable. You walk into a room and it reacts. Not because you demand it, not because you ask for it, but because your presence, coherent, anchored, and charged, reshapes the space. People may not understand it. They may not even be able to articulate it, but they feel it instinctively, on the back of their neck, in the subtle tension in the air, in the unconscious pull that draws them toward you again and again. That is the power of the shadow, fully integrated, fully owned. That is the beginning of true magnetism. And the best part? Once you begin this work, there's no going back to ordinary. Once you've felt the force of your own presence, the quiet command of your energy, the thrill of moving through the world unfiltered and undiluted, the ordinary will never satisfy you again. You'll notice the patterns of others, the predictability, the safe mediocrity, and you'll instinctively know how to rise above it. Not with ego, but with authority, with depth, with the quiet but irresistible force of someone who has integrated the full spectrum of themselves. Magnetism is not a skill you learn. It's a state you cultivate. And it begins with the shadow, the part of you feared, denied, or ignored. Embrace it. Integrate it. Let it fuel your presence rather than suppress it. And the moment you do, you will step into a world where your energy no longer needs to compete. It simply commands. Because in the end, people aren't drawn to superficial beauty. They aren't drawn to social approval. They aren't drawn to charm that fades. They are drawn to life in its fullest, most intense, and unapologetic form. They are drawn to someone who has looked into the dark, smiled, and said, "I am here, and I will be felt." By now, you understand. Magnetism isn't about adding something you don't have. It's about reclaiming what's already yours and learning how to wield it with precision. And one of the most overlooked skills in this art is energy management. You can think of your energy like a rare and precious currency. Most people spend it like loose change without thought, without strategy, without restraint. They pour it into endless chatter, into nervous gestures, into meaningless social rituals. And in doing so, they dilute their presence until nothing remains but static. The magnetic person doesn't make that mistake. They move with economy. Every motion, every word, every pause is deliberate. Not stiff, not robotic, but intentional. Their gestures have weight because they're not constant. Their words land because they're not competing with a flood of noise. Here's the rule. What's constant is invisible. What's rare is treasured. If you want your presence to command attention, stop giving it away without thought. This is where silence becomes a weapon. Most people treat silence as a void to be filled. They fear it. They rush to plug it with words, laughter, anything to avoid discomfort. The magnetic person does the opposite. They allow silence to breathe. They let it become charged, thick, alive. Silence can be more commanding than the loudest voice in the room. If you hold it with confidence in conversation, you don't rush to respond. You listen, you observe, and when you finally speak, your words carry the weight of that attention. This alone changes the dynamic. People lean in not because you demanded it, but because your rhythm forces them to. This leads us to one of the most potent aspects of magnetism: emotional time control. Most people live at the mercy of the room's tempo. If others are rushed, they rush. If others are casual, they slacken. But the magnetic person imposes their own tempo. They know how to slow down a moment until it feels like the air thickens, how to accelerate the energy until it feels like a spark could ignite the room. They decide when to break tension and when to let it stretch. This is the art of pacing. Like a conductor leading an orchestra, you control not just your own energy, but the collective emotional rhythm. And people follow without realizing it. But here's the paradox. Control is invisible when done right. The moment you try to show that you're in control, it turns into ego. Real influence doesn't announce itself. It just quietly rearranges the environment to match your state. That's why the most magnetic people don't seem to be doing anything. And yet, the room moves with them. Then comes unpredictability. The human brain is wired to notice change. Predictability numbs attention. Unpredictability captures it. And yet, most people live like clockwork. Same reactions, same expressions, same rhythm. They become scenery, present but unseen. Magnetism demands calculated unpredictability. This doesn't mean being chaotic or erratic. It means breaking patterns strategically. A pause where a word is expected. A sudden shift from warmth to coolness. A gaze that holds longer than polite, then breaks suddenly. These small jolts wake the other person's nervous system. They create the feeling that they can't quite pin you down, and that unpredictability becomes addictive. This is why predictable charm fades. It's why many charismatic people are impressive for a moment, then forgettable. They give everything at once, reveal all their cards, and leave nothing to pursue. The magnetic person reveals just enough to spark pursuit, then retreats, leaving space for the imagination to fill. Think of it as the dance of presence. Sometimes you advance, sometimes you withdraw. Sometimes you burn like fire, sometimes you smolder like embers. Your presence is alive. It moves, shifts, adapts. And because it adapts, it never stops being interesting. And here's the truth about absence. It's one of the most powerful tools you have. A constant presence becomes background noise. But a presence that appears, impacts, and then disappears, lingers in the mind like a fragrance. People will replay the moment, wonder about it, crave the next one. This isn't about playing games. It's about understanding how humans work. The mind is wired to seek completion, to resolve the unfinished. If you never give them all of you at once, they will keep coming back, consciously or not, to get more. Now, let's talk about emotional alchemy. Magnetism isn't just about how you look or move. It's about how you make people feel. Most people live in predictable emotional loops. They think the same thoughts, feel the same feelings, react in the same ways. A magnetic person disrupts that loop. They introduce new rhythms, new feelings, new emotional states. It could be a phrase that challenges their assumptions, a silence that forces them to self-reflect, a gesture that contradicts the moment in a way that sparks curiosity. You're not there to entertain them. You're there to alter their state. And when you do, you become an event in their mind, something they can't fully explain but can't stop thinking about. And here's the key. People don't remember facts. They remember sensations. They won't replay your exact words, but they'll remember the shiver in their spine, the tightening in their chest, the way the room seemed to change temperature. That's why real magnetism is less about self-promotion and more about experience creation. You make them feel, and that feeling anchors you in their memory. This is also where controlled vulnerability comes in. Too much, and you bleed out your power. Too little, and you seem inaccessible. But just enough, deliberately revealed at the right moment, creates connection so real it bypasses their defenses. It could be a subtle admission, a flash of genuine emotion, a story told not to impress, but to reveal a piece of your inner world. The magic is in the contrast, strength and vulnerability, danger and warmth, presence and distance. This controlled contradiction is like a puzzle. The mind can't solve, and so it keeps turning you over, trying to make sense of you. Remember this. The unpredictable is unforgettable. When people can predict you, they stop thinking about you. When they can't, you occupy space in their mind long after you're gone. And this brings us to emotional dominance. Not physical dominance, not intimidation, but the ability to set the emotional tone wherever you are. The magnetic person doesn't just read the room, they recalibrate it. They can take tension and diffuse it. Take dullness and ignite it. Take chaos and slow it to stillness. And the way they do this isn't through force. It's through presence. Because presence is contagious. If you are grounded, others begin to ground. If you are calm, others begin to slow. If you are electric, others begin to spark. This is why your inner state is everything. If you walk into a room anxious, rushed, needy, people feel it and mirror it back. If you walk in centered, unshaken, fully anchored in yourself, the environment begins to bend around you. That's the real secret. Control yourself, and you control the space. Most people react to the environment. The magnetic person makes the environment react to them. That's the difference between walking into a room and adapting versus walking into a room and changing it. And this is where mastery lies. Your energy, your timing, your unpredictability, your ability to create emotional shifts. These are your weapons. Used carelessly, they're just noise. Used consciously, they make you unforgettable. In the next stage, we'll go even deeper into the symbolic mark you leave on people. The invisible anchors you install in their subconscious so that even in your absence, you remain. Because the truth is, magnetism doesn't end when you leave the room. If you do it right, that's when it truly begins. When most people think of attraction, they think of the moment. The look across the room, the shared laugh, the lingering eye contact. And yes, those moments are powerful. But real magnetism doesn't stop when the moment ends. Real magnetism keeps working in your absence. It follows them home. It slips into their thoughts when they least expect it. It makes them wonder about you weeks, months, even years later. How? Through the symbolic mark. A symbolic mark is anything, an image, a phrase, a scent, a sound, that their subconscious associates only with you. It's not something generic. It's not nice eyes or good style. It's a personal code embedded into their memory that acts like a trigger. Every time they encounter it again, their mind automatically plays back the emotional state you created. Here's the power of it. People forget conversations. They forget details. But symbols stick. Symbols bypass rational thought and speak directly to the primal brain. They are the oldest language we know. And if you can plant one in someone's mind, you no longer need to be physically present for them to feel your presence. Think about it. A particular cologne or perfume used sparingly but consistently. A certain phrase you say that no one else does. A gesture. A way of touching your glass before you drink. A unique rhythm to your speech. Anything that feels authentic to you and is impossible to separate from your presence. Here's the trick. You can't force it. If you try to make a symbol obvious, it feels staged and the spell breaks. A symbolic mark must be organic but intentional. Something you genuinely own, not something you're faking for effect. The goal is simple. When you're not there, you want the world to remind them of you, without them even realizing why they feel the pull again. Now this is where most people fail. They think magnetism is about being around all the time, about constant attention, constant presence, constant input. But the magnetic person understands the law of calculated absence. Calculated absence means you leave at the right moment, not when interest has faded, but when tension is at its peak. It's the cliffhanger at the end of a chapter, the unfinished melody that plays in their head until the next time they hear it. This is how you plant obsession. 1. Create a charged emotional state. 2. Anchor it with a symbol. 3. Withdraw before it resolves. It's not about manipulation. It's about rhythm. The brain is addicted to completion, to finding patterns, to closing loops. When you leave a loop open, they'll replay the interaction again and again, trying to finish it. And every replay strengthens your imprint. But here's a warning. This only works if your presence is strong enough to be missed. If you leave too soon without having created impact, it's just absence. That's why everything we've discussed so far, energy, shadow integration, unpredictability, comes first. You need to make your moments dense. Each interaction must be charged enough that its absence is felt like a change in air pressure. This brings us to myth-making. Every truly magnetic person becomes, in the minds of others, larger than life. Not because they brag or constantly talk about themselves, but because they know how to let others fill in the blanks. When you don't reveal everything, people speculate. They create stories about you. They imagine details. And often, what they imagine is more powerful than anything you could have said outright. The myth is built in the spaces you leave empty. It's built in the questions you don't answer. It's built in the contradictions you embody. And here's the secret. The myth doesn't have to be entirely accurate. In fact, it rarely is. But it becomes real in their mind because they've authored it themselves. And once someone has invested in creating a story about you, they're far less likely to let it go. Your job isn't to control the entire story. It's to control the tone of it. You do this by embodying certain traits so consistently that they form the skeleton of the myth. Mystery plus coherence, intrigue. You don't change who you are to suit the moment. You stay anchored in your essence, and the gaps invite their imagination to do the rest. Here's another crucial element: dualities. A myth without contrast is flat. You want to embody contrasts that seem impossible, but fit together perfectly in you. Calm and danger, kindness and dominance, warmth and distance. Why? Because the human brain hates contradictions it can't resolve. It wants to put you in a box, label you, file you away. But if you refuse to fit in one category, they can't close that file. They keep revisiting it, trying to make sense of you. And every revisit deepens the imprint. You see, magnetism isn't about being understood. It's about being felt, and often, being just out of reach of total understanding. And here's something even more fascinating. Your symbolic mark doesn't always have to be deliberate. Sometimes it emerges naturally from the way you live, the way you move, the way you react. But when you become aware of it, you can amplify it. The more consistently you anchor experiences to that mark, the stronger it becomes. This is why you must also guard your symbols. Don't let them become diluted. If you have a phrase, don't throw it into every casual conversation. If you have a scent, don't wear it to the grocery store. Protect the association. Keep it exclusive to charged moments, to high-impact interactions. That way, it retains its power. Think of it like a rare song. If it's played all the time, it loses its magic. But if it only plays at certain moments, those moments become unforgettable. Now, let's address the danger of overexposure. Too many people ruin their own magnetism by over-explaining, oversharing. They flood the air with themselves until there's no mystery left. The mind loses interest when there's nothing left to discover. Your goal is to always leave a sense that there's more. More layers, more stories, more moments waiting to happen. And you achieve that by revealing selectively, by letting time pass between appearances, by ensuring that every encounter with you feels like an event. Magnetism is cumulative. It builds over time as each interaction adds another thread to the connection. But for it to last, you must resist the temptation to feed it constantly. Hunger is part of desire. Space is part of attraction. When people have just enough of you to crave more, you're in control. When they have too much of you, you've handed them control. And once they no longer need to wonder about you, the magnetism starts to fade. So remember this: symbolic mark, something uniquely yours, anchored to an emotional state. Calculated absence, leave while the tension is high. Myth-making, let others fill in the blanks. They'll make you larger than life. Dualities, embody contrast to stay unpredictable and intriguing. These aren't tricks. They're the architecture of lasting impact. They're the reasons some people remain unforgettable without needing to be in the spotlight every day. And when you master them, you'll notice something incredible. The more you pull back, the more they come forward. The more you reveal, the more they chase the next revelation. The more you live in your rhythm, the more the world adjusts to it. If you've made it here, you've already stepped beyond the surface. You've faced your shadow, learned to channel raw energy, mastered unpredictability, and planted symbolic marks that work in your absence. But there's one more layer, one more shift that separates those who are temporarily magnetic from those who remain unforgettable for a lifetime. It's called lethal calm. Lethal calm is not passivity. It is not indifference. It is the opposite of weakness. It's a stillness so charged with potential that people instinctively feel it before you speak. It's the calm of someone who knows they are in control. Not because they are forcing control, but because they are free from need. Need is the enemy of magnetism. The moment you need someone to like you, approve of you, validate you, or respond to you, your energy shifts. Suddenly, but unmistakably, the dynamic changes. Your rhythm adjusts to theirs. You move toward them instead of holding your ground. And in that moment, the current reverses. You are no longer the force pulling them in. You are the one chasing. Lethal calm is the antidote to this. It is built on the deep embodied belief that you are already complete, that your value does not rise or fall based on anyone's reaction, that you can walk away from anyone, not out of bitterness, but because you refuse to betray yourself to keep them. When someone feels that in you, it triggers something primal. They sense that they can't move you with ordinary tactics. They can't bribe you with flattery, push you with insults, or lure you with false promises. You are the mountain. They are the weather. The wind may blow, the storm may rage, but you remain unmoved until you decide to move. Here's the paradox. The calmer you are, the more others feel your power. Stillness makes people uneasy when they can sense potential behind it. Think of a predator crouched in the grass, not rushing, not lunging, just watching. The prey doesn't know when the move will come, only that it will. That anticipation makes every moment electric. But lethal calm is not just stillness. It's rhythm control. We live in a world of constant noise, constant movement, constant reaction. Most people are swept along in the current of others' emotions, matching their speed, their tone, their pace. Rhythm control means you never get pulled into that current. You set the pace. If someone rushes, you slow down. If they try to dominate with volume, you lower your voice. If they flood the space with energy, you create space by pausing. The moment you control the rhythm, you control the interaction. And when you control the interaction, you control the frame through which they experience you. Here's why this is lethal. Rhythm is emotional regulation. People unconsciously sync to the emotional tempo of whoever they feel is leading the interaction. When you are unshakable, they begin to relax or become unsettled, depending on the effect you want. In either case, they're in your reality. And this is where the final truth about magnetism emerges. It's not about them. It's about the emotional climate you create and maintain. The magnetic person doesn't just have a strong presence. They create an environment around them. When people enter that environment, they feel different than they did before. That difference is addictive. And because it's tied to you, they want to return to it. To sustain this over a lifetime, you must cultivate internal abundance. That means your energy doesn't come from others. It comes from your own life, your own pursuits, your own sources of meaning. When your world is already full, people feel they are stepping into something bigger when they meet you. The opposite is what drains magnetism. When your world is empty and you rely on others to fill it, that's when interactions feel needy, even if you hide it well. People sense it, and nothing repels faster than the subtle sense of being used as someone's emotional fuel. Instead, live in such a way that you are already overflowing. Build a life rich with experiences, challenges, creation, stillness, and movement. Then, when people enter it, they feel like they're stepping into a current that already exists, not one you've manufactured for them. This is also why loss doesn't break the magnetic person. They can walk away from anyone or anything because they know they will regenerate. They're not clinging to the moment. They're carrying the source with them. Now, here's the final piece. Command through scarcity. Scarcity doesn't mean disappearing forever. It means your presence is rare enough to be valued. Even in long-term relationships, romantic, professional, or social. If you're always available, your impact dulls. The magnetic person creates rhythms of presence and absence, tension and release, intimacy and mystery. They give enough to keep the connection alive, but never so much that it becomes ordinary. And because they are calm, because they are free from need, those absences never feel like punishment or games. They feel natural, inevitable, part of the rhythm that makes every return feel like an event. When you master lethal calm, you stop chasing impact. You become impact. You become the steady drumbeat. Others sink to the presence that redefines the emotional climate wherever you go. And the beauty is, once this becomes who you are, you never lose it. Styles change. Fashion changes. Youth changes. But the presence of a person who has faced their shadow, who moves with deliberate rhythm, who is no longer ruled by need, that never goes out of style. That is what makes someone magnetic at 25 and magnetic at 75. And if you have truly absorbed the message of this series, then this is what you now understand. Magnetism is not something you perform on others. It is something you embody. It is a way of being, not an act. It is the natural result of living in harmony with your power, your shadow, and your pace. Once you arrive at that level, you stop thinking about attraction as strategy or technique. You are no longer trying to catch attention across a room or mentally rehearsing what to say next. You become the presence people instinctively respond to. You do not have to ask for attention. It comes to you. You do not have to explain your value. People feel it before you ever speak. And perhaps the most powerful shift of all is this. You stop obsessing over whether people approve of you, because you realize approval was never the goal. The goal was always to become unforgettable. A truly magnetic person does not leave an impression only on the mind. They leave it on the nervous system. They are remembered in the sudden rush of a heartbeat, in the silence that falls when they enter a room, in the ache their absence leaves behind. That is the level you are now capable of stepping into. And if you choose to live this way, not as a temporary phase, not as a role you play, but as your natural state, you will notice the world begins to respond to you differently. Doors begin to open. Eyes begin to turn. Energy moves towards you without force. And all of it begins with the stillness at your center. The shadow you have embraced. The rhythm you alone command. That is lethal calm. That is the highest form of magnetism. And now, it belongs to you. If this resonated with you, do not let it pass by. Subscribe now and go deeper into a kind of power most people never truly access. Each week, I will give you the tools to refine your presence, hold a room, and become impossible to forget. This is only the beginning. The real transformation starts the moment you choose to embody it.